So the United States Army has a lot of history that it's understandably proud of. The 3rd Infantry Division at the Battle of the Marne, um, the 1st Infantry Division on Omaha Beach, um, the 7th Cav at Idrang, LZ X-Ray. I mean, there are a lot of moments in the Army history that they're undeniably proud of. And then there's moments that the Army doesn't like to talk about. There's Hill 875 in Vietnam. There's Kasserine Pass in World War II. There's Black Sunday for Iraq. And there's Cop Keating for Afghanistan. There's moments that we really don't like to talk about. In Korea, one such moment, Taskforce Smith, has been one of those moments that the Army will talk about as a lesson of never again. Never again will we have a Taskforce Smith. But the one task force the Army won't even mention in its various studies of battles, of wars, is going to be Task Force Faith. Task Force Faith is mentioned only offhand at best in study of Army history. Oftentimes Task Force Faith is seen as well, everything went wrong and just leave it at that. And unfortunately, that deprives everyone involved with understanding of what happened. And there's nothing but tragedy when it comes to Task Force Faith. It's hard to find any redeeming factors because in the end, this task force just came apart. The senior leaders were gone. They'd been in contact for nearly 6 days straight, and when they got to a final roadblock, the infantry support was just gone. The truck column full of wounded was just overrun and destroyed. And understanding how that came about and also how we deal with that is one of those things that I wish people would know more about. So the question is, what is Task Force Faith? Well, the easiest answer would be it was a hodgepodge unit that was put together hastily by 10th Corps during the late part of November 1950 as the 1st Marine Division was pushing north while supporting 8th Army. At the time, 7th Infantry Division had come ashore with 1st Marine Division during the Incheon landings and had helped fight for Seoul and had helped push north. And 7th Infantry Division units were actually on the Yalu River when they got orders to assemble a regimental-sized task force to help guard the Marines' eastern flank as they were at the Chenjin or Chosin Reservoir. At the time, the 5th Marine Regiment was guarding the east side, and the 7th Marine Regiment was on the west side pushing north. And Oliver Smith, the 1st Marine Division commander, wanted his force unified. Well, this hodgepodge unit of the 7th Infantry Division was 1 battalion from the 32nd Infantry, 1 battalion from the 31st Infantry, that would be the 3rd Battalion, 2 batteries from the 57th Field Artillery, and 1 battery from the 15th Anti-Aircraft Self-Propelled, and minus 1 platoon. Then all the service troops for the regiment. 2nd Battalion 31st Infantry was supposed to be included in the overall force structure that went to the east side of Chosin, but it never made it there, and was part of the subsequent breakout for the Marines to Hungnam. Now, what ended up happening is 331 and 57th FA were separated from 132, which was further up the reservoir. And on the night of 27 November 1950, basically all hell broke loose. The better part of 2 Chinese divisions struck these 2 isolated units. And the 31st Medical Detachment was basically ambushed and destroyed at a roadblock on Hill 1221 at a hairpin turn. And that the first night, 3rd Battalion, 31st Infantry lost its command staff, so did 57th FA, and the infantry companies, K, I, and L companies, were pretty much overrun. The 2 batteries of artillery had to fight for their positions. I think A battery was overrun and had to fight back to their foxholes in the morning. 132 fared a little bit better, but on the first night, the Alpha Company commander was killed, and then the lines between Charlie and Bravo, or C and B companies, was broken, and other sundry things happened. The next night, the position for 132 became untenable, and Colonel Faith ordered a retreat to the inlet perimeter where 331 had been. And during that retreat, Colonel McLean, who was the regimental commander, went missing. Was basically captured by the Chinese and died of wounds. So Lieutenant Colonel Faith, who had never commanded a unit in combat before Korea, ended up in command of this regimental task force, and for 2 days held out, but realized that on 1 December he just couldn't hold, so he ordered a breakout attempt, and almost immediately things went wrong. The anti-aircraft guns, which were providing a majority of the fire, the rear one was just abandoned at the inlet perimeter, and a lot of units didn't even get word that the withdrawal was happening. During the initial breakout, the first 200 yards or so was heavy fighting, and an F-4U Corsair accidentally dropped napalm on them as they broke out, and things just went downhill from there. There was a bridge between them and the final fire block that was blown out, and they had to come up with a way to cross with the wounded, and it was, if you ever read Roy Appleman's book, it was absolutely hellacious. Now, when the sun finally went down, what was left of 31st Infantry, what was left of 32nd Infantry, and whoever could walk from the artillery batteries, assaulted Hill 1221. In the process, Colonel Faith was wounded by grenade fragments, and the infantry support just went on. And the convoy of wounded soldiers in trucks made it about another mile and a half before they were stopped at a roadblock and overrun. And pretty much all the wounded were either killed or further wounded and had to escape on their own as many as 800 to 1,000 men died in this task force. And unfortunately, what had happened to this task force, and given the Marines' stellar performance during the breakout to Hungnam Harbor, a lot of people think that the Army troops just didn't fight. A lot of people think that during the battle, the Army just kind of gave up or didn't really put out a lot of effort. And this is a very unfortunate reading of what happened. Our understanding of task force faith is rather skewed. I think it's important for us to remember and to talk about task force faith, to look at what went wrong, to remember the dead, to try to account for them, and to understand that just because it might not happen now doesn't mean it can't happen now. There's a lot of lessons that we can learn. For instance, having isolated commands, the importance of any breakout attempt in not having hundreds of wounded troops. Had this task force not had 500 plus wounded troops, it's entirely possible they might have made the breakout without significant casualties. The other thing to keep in mind is, how does a unit function when most of its senior leaders have been killed or wounded? How does a unit continue to function when they've been going for 5 days straight? We need to study these things and know about it. And ultimately, we need to accept that there are honorable defeats. When people have given their all, and have pushed as hard as they possibly can, and they still lose, that's not dishonorable. We need to remember that even when we lose, there are acts of sheer mind-numbing heroism that are just absolutely incomprehensible. That are, if anything, more important to remember. Because when there's a lost cause, when everybody can tell there's a lost cause, and these people still have devotion to duty, devotion to their comrades, and fight on even though they're outnumbered, surrounded, and running low on ammunition, you have stories of people with multiple wounds being told, hey, we need someone to go man this machine gun. And the guy says, well, I can't walk. Don't worry, we'll take you to your post, and you can just stay in that hole. Hey, I need you to man this foxhole. I know you can't walk. I'm going to put you in this foxhole. I need you to stay here and cover your sector. And the guy's like, okay, I'll do it. It's just unbelievable. Or making an assault on a fortified position with only one clip of ammunition, which is 8 rounds for the M1 Garand. Or fighting for days without any sense of leadership, and still fighting when you are just bone tired, bone weary, or you've been wounded multiple times and people tell you, hey, we need to push this 4-ton truck off the road. You have stories of guys reopening wounds, trying to give their last full measure of devotion, trying to push these disabled trucks off the road. If anything, the heroism of task force faith deserves to be looked at more than, say, the rah-rah victories. We need to remember the bravery in defeat. And unfortunately, I think the U.S. Army has a problem acknowledging it when we've lost, acknowledging heroism in those moments. Lieutenant Colonel Faith ended up getting the Medal of Honor, and there's a number of other people who got the Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Stars, and things of that nature. I think that the Army should definitely be teaching every single mid-level staff officer, and I think it should be something that's taught at BNOC and ANOC. You know, what do you do when your entire battalion command staff is either wounded or casualties? What do you do when half your NCOs are gone? How do you react? And it should be something that we think about in the Army. How do we promote the leaders? How do we make sure that Private Snuffy isn't just a follower when everything goes to hell in a handbasket? When, you know, everyone from sergeant all the way up to the platoon sergeant is a casualty, you need to know that that PFC is going to be able to step into that role. There's a lot of lessons we can learn from Task Force Faith, and I think on the preceding days I'll talk about them, but this is a subject I'm really passionate about, and I thought I'd give you a brief introduction into what the task force is and give you some of my thoughts on the mission. And yeah, I'll tell you about it as the days progress. I'll give you a timeline of events so you can kind of understand what happened. I highly recommend, if this has been at all interesting to you, to check out the documentary Task Force Faith. It's on Amazon Prime, and also to read East of Chosin by Colonel Appleman, Roy E. Appleman. It details some of the things I'll be talking about in much more detail than I will ever be able to. But yeah, I really recommend you check it out and let me know your thoughts.